Did you ever revisit a favorite childhood story and find it was darker than you remembered? When I reread Roald Dahl's 1964 novel Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I realized just how much darker and more unsettling it is compared to its 1971 film adaptation. Was this just the result of Hollywood softening things for kids, or was there something more intentional at play? I've spent weeks poring over the book to find out, how does it compare to the lighter, more whimsical movie that most of us know so well? And how do we handle classic stories that suddenly seem very problematic in the modern era? Hi, I'm Lee. Grab your cup, there's tea to share. Charlie versus the Others, Economic Divide and Poverty. Immediately what stood out on this reread were the constant mentions of Charlie's size, or the lack of it. But he's not just coincidentally small. It's not genetics, it's malnutrition. Chapter 10 is literally called The Family Begins to Starve. In contrast, the 1971 film softens this. The buckets are still poor, but the grim details like Charlie growing frighteningly thin are downplayed and the tone is way less extreme. In the movie, Charlie's family does struggle financially, but Charlie specifically is clean, bright-eyed, and not visibly starving. This creates a more sanitized and digestible version of poverty for the audiences, compared to the raw despair of Dahl's novel. For example, in the book, Charlie finds a dollar bill in the street and he knows that he must buy food immediately. Why he considers chocolate and food to be synonymous is another conversation. The film skips the desperation of immediate hunger, instead giving us a purely joyful moment. Coin, money, shiny, shiny. Because book Charlie lives in abject poverty, he contrasts sharply with the other four golden ticket winners. Augustus's family has enough money to finance his hobby of eating. Veruca's father buys hundreds of thousands of bars for her, and she shows up at Wonka's factory wearing a mink coat. They truly live in a different world from little Charlie, who gets one bar of chocolate every year on his birthday and makes it last for a solid month. Although the hardship and deprivation book Charlie endures is heartbreaking, it leads to the very fairy tale quality that Charlie's story brings. His physical and metaphorical smallness in the book aligns him with all humble heroes, from Frodo to Cinderella, and it sets us up for his satisfying reversal of fate. Perhaps the small and meek truly will inherit the earth. Speaking of small persons, Oompa Loompas, nightmare fuel or human trafficking. Willy Wonka was my favorite movie. I viewed the movie Oompa Loompas as kind of like what the elves are for Santa or Tinkerbell is for Peter Pan. Pixie-ish sidekicks that enable a supernatural hero to do their thing. But in the book, the symbiotic nature of the Loompa-Wonka relationship is muddied by a few disturbing implications. Book Wonka says the Oompa Loompas were shipped and smuggled to his factory, but people are not shipped or smuggled. Things are. If he shipped them, he's not treating them like people. Add to this the fact that he smuggled them over in packing cases with holes in them. You have colonialist overtones that hurt to read. But the creepy book version details just kept coming. For example, can they leave? The famous line about the factory is that nobody ever goes in and nobody ever comes out. So maybe the Oompa Loompas are also free to come and go, but we don't know that. I'm just picturing an Oompa Loompa trying to ride the bus and pay the fare and cacao beans because Wonka doesn't pay them real money. I got so uncomfortable I had to know if I was imagining things. So I went straight to the source, and what I found was even worse than I expected. In this Roald Dahl biography, I found it the real reason the Oompa Loompas feel like they're the subjects of exploitation, deportation, and trafficking is because... In the original text, the Oompa Loompas were black and were found by Wonka in Africa. The original book editor and publisher had no problem with this, by the way, but after publishing, it was found to be way too tone-deaf for the civil rights era. So in later editions, the text was changed to reference white-skinned little people found in Loompa Land, not Africa, and the illustrations reflected this racial update. Schadenfreude and hope, why we love watching the kids fail and Charlie win. Another big difference between the book and the film is the level of focus on all the bad kids' punishments. Admit it, you love watching these kids fail. And you're not alone, there's actually a word for that. Schadenfreude. Of course we enjoy watching their misfortune. These kids are cartoonishly terrible. So, if Schadenfreude explains why we enjoy the bad kid's downfall, why do we enjoy Charlie's victory so much? Another one-word answer, mudita, the joy of watching someone succeed. In the film, there are plenty of reasons to root for honest underdog Charlie and to take joy in his ultimate win. But book Charlie, as opposed to movie Charlie, doesn't actually have to earn his happy ending. He just has to survive the factory tour. In the film, Charlie actually has some flaws and ultimately does a very heroic deed to win his happy ending. So we can feel genuinely satisfied at his hero's journey and fully enjoy his victory. Book Charlie, on the other hand, does nothing bad, but he does nothing good either. He has suffered a lot, so does that mean we all deserve a great reward just because we have all suffered? The movie's a bit more clear-cut in who deserves rewards, the pure of heart who won't take advantage of others and don't seek revenge. We root for both Book Charlie and Movie Charlie, but Book Charlie is less heroic. Back to the Schadenfreude. I said the book lingers on it, and that's an understatement. The book revels in each kid's nasty end via these musical numbers. You think the songs are long in the movie? Oh, just wait. Augustus's downfall song is 52 lines long. 52! At the end of the book, unlike the movie, we get to see the kids leaving the factory, and we see that they're alive and well, but only after having gloated over their punishments for half the novel. Fat phobia. Why is Augustus Gloop treated worse than the other kids? You'd think all the bad kids would get the same treatment, right? Wrong. Not so fast. The book's mean-spirited treatment of Augustus Gloop specifically is a sight to behold. There's a bit of fat-shaming early on. You have to listen to this. The picture showed a 9-year-old boy who was so enormously fat, he looked as though he must have been blown up with a powerful pump. Great flabby folds of fat bulged out from every part of his body, and his face was like a monstrous ball of dough with two small, greedy, curranty eyes peering out upon the world. Dahl wasn't just criticizing Augustus, he was roasting him. Let's look at the downfall song that the Oompa Loompas sing about him. The other kids' songs are about their vices. Violet's song is not even about her. It's about another gum-chewing woman called Mrs. Bigelow. Bigelow? Veruca's is about bad parenting, and Mike's is an advertisement for book reading. Only Augustus's song is clearly criticizing the child instead of the behavior. The film version at least gives some more musing on the subject, even asking rhetorical questions about overeating. What do you think will come of that? But in the book, only overweight children are reviled as irredeemable wretches. The next three kids are not character assassinated in the same way Augustus is. So what makes gluttony worse than greed, vanity, or laziness? Especially in a book that conflates chocolate with food and keeps indicating that chocolate is nutritious and sustaining, even helping poor starving Charlie to revive his strength. So eating tons and tons of chocolate is good and even healthy as long as you have an average BMI. The movie is much more even-handed in its treatment of Augustus, while the book's description of him is harsh and unrelenting and paints him as unredeemable. This is so potentially hurtful to kids with body image issues. So, after all this, do we just leave Charlie and the Chocolate Factory behind? I dove into Charlie and the Chocolate Factory expecting magic and childhood whimsy, and I did find it. Marshmallow pillows, lickable wallpaper. The whole candy wonderland was still as entrancing as it ever was. But the themes of poverty, potential human trafficking, joy in others' misfortune, and the treatment of overweight kids certainly made this read-through feel distinctly heavier. So, to answer the question, how do we handle classic stories that suddenly seem problematic in the modern era? Maybe we don't have to abandon them, but we do have to go in with both eyes open. The film is more palatable to a modern audience, but the book is a sweet treat with a bitter filling, and still worth reading. Maybe the greatest takeaway here is that even flawed stories can shape us. We get to decide which lessons to keep and which to let go. Thank you for hanging out with me. Let me know in the comments what your biggest takeaway from Wonka was.